My wife's family tormented us for half a decade, repeatedly urging her twin to just conceive our child naturally with me, to save IVE costs, because the genetics would be identical. So, I finally detonated, and both sisters stood beside me. I met my wife, Iris, through her identical twin, Stella, at a biotech summit in Boston in October 2017. Stella and I sat together during a brutal, 2-hour keynote speech on supply chain logistics, passing sarcastic notes on the back of conference flyers. When she learned I sold medical devices, she lit up. She told me her sister was a pediatric nurse and absolutely hated the current infusion pumps her hospital was using. Iris arrived for lunch at 12:30 p.m. sharp, wearing a green wool coat, and we instantly clicked over a debate about hospital procurement protocols. Stella just sat there, eating her salad and grinning at her successful matchmaking. 4 years later, Iris and I bought a 3-bedroom house in the Chicago suburbs. Stella was our first house guest. She helped us paint the living room. Everything felt perfectly normal. We were just a family building a life. Then came the summer of 2022. That July, we rented a lake house in Lake Geneva with Iris's family. The air was thick and humid, the kind of heat that makes everyone sluggish and a little irritable. On Saturday night, after dinner, Iris and I sat on the screened-in porch with her parents and Stella. We were nervous. We had been trying to conceive for 2 years. We had endured the silent, heavy grief of negative tests month after month. We had just committed to a grueling IF process, and Iris was already anxious about the hormone injections. We told them because we were vulnerable. We were hoping for a safety net of support. Instead, Iris's father took a long pull from his beer, wiped his mouth with the back of his hand, pointed at Stella and said, "Why pay a clinic 20 grand? Stella's got the exact same Dina. She and Nathan should just get it done the old-fashioned way. It'll be the exact same baby." The porch went completely dead. The only sound was the hum of the bug zapper near the door. Stella dropped her fork onto her ceramic plate with a sharp clatter. Iris stared at her father, her eyes immediately filling with tears. I felt a hot spike of anger in my chest, but I forced it down. I brushed it off out loud as a horribly misguided, drunken boomer comment. I told him he was out of line. I assumed he would wake up hungover and humiliated. I was wrong. By Thanksgiving, the sick concept hadn't disappeared. It had mutated into a relentless campaign. I was in the cold garage grabbing firewood before dinner. The concrete walls echoed. Iris's mother ambushed Stella near the side door. "You know it makes logical sense," she whispered aggressively, though the acoustics carried her voice right to me. I stopped moving. The logs dug into my forearm. "Nathan is a handsome guy. If you just slipped into their room tonight, you could save them the $18,500 clinic fee. You know they don't have that kind of cash lying around." Stella actually gagged. "Mom, you're being psychotic. Stop talking about my sister's husband like he's a stud whore." It didn't stop. At a Labor Day barbecue, Iris's brother loudly proclaimed over the grill that Stella should just take one for the team. But the real discovery, the one that made my blood run cold, came in early November. Iris had asked me to print a recipe from our shared laptop. I logged in and opened the browser. Iris's mother had used the laptop earlier to check her mail and left a tab open. It was an email chain. She was actively corresponding with a holistic doctor in Sedona. She was trying to find a high-dose herbal supplement that could artificially sync Stella's ovulation with Iris's cycle. Her emails detailed a plan to surprise us with a natural pregnancy window, suggesting they could orchestrate a weekend trip and push Stella and me together. It wasn't a bad joke anymore. It was a calculated obsession with erasing my wife's unique autonomy, treating her grief as a logistical problem that could be solved by swapping out the woman. The breaking point arrived at her parents' 35th anniversary dinner at Gibson's Bar and Steakhouse downtown. We were seated in a private room. The walls were dark mahogany, the lighting dim. Iris and I were exhausted. We had just endured our second failed embryo transfer. The heartbreak was physical. Iris was bruised from the injection, her hormones crashing, her spirit completely frayed. Stella and her boyfriend, Theo, sat across from us, offering quiet, steady support. Her parents had just ordered their second bottle of Merlot. The waiter poured the wine and stepped out of the room, pulling the heavy door shut. Her mother tapped her fingernail against her crystal glass. "Well," she sighed, looking at Iris with a terrifying lack of empathy, "since the clinic failed again, maybe it's time for Plan B, Stella. The hotel upstairs has lovely suites. We'll cover the room rate if you and Nathan want to finally do this the smart way." I slammed my palms onto the mahogany table. The heavy silver cutlery rattled against the plate. "Do not say another word," I said. My voice was dangerously low. It didn't even sound like me. Her father scoffed, leaning back in his leather chair. "Calm down, Nathan. We're just being practical about genetics. You want a kid, we're giving you a solution." "Practical?" I stood up. My chair scraped violently across the hardwood floor. I towered over the table. "You have spent 3 years treating my wife as a defective incubator, and her sister as spare part. You are relentlessly trying to groom your own daughter into sleeping with her brother-in-law. It is sick, it is depraved, and it has absolutely nothing to do with genetics." Her mother gasped, placing a hand over her pearl necklace in a pathetic display of shock. "We are trying to help you build a family. By destroying my marriage," I yelled. The acoustics of the small room trapped the sound, amplifying it. "I married Iris, not a Dina profile, not a genetic match. Iris, and if you think I would ever betray her trust, or violate Stella's boundaries, to fulfill some twisted breeding fantasy, you are out of your minds." Stella stood up immediately. She didn't hesitate. "He's absolutely right. You guys are disgusting. I've told you to drop this a dozen times. I am not a surrogate, and I am not a stand-in for my sister." Theo stood up next, throwing his napkin on the table. "It's genuinely horrifying to listen to. We're leaving." Iris grabbed her coat. Her hands were shaking violently, but when she spoke, her voice was remarkably steady. "We are done. Do not call us." We walked out. We left them sitting there with full glasses of wine and a $600 bill. That was 7 months ago. We went full no contact. We changed the locks on our house. We blocked their numbers. Stella did the same. The silence that followed was the first peace we had felt in years. In March, we had our third embryo transfer. 2 weeks later, Iris woke me up at 5 a.m., holding a plastic stick with 2 solid pink lines. We sat on the bathroom floor and cried until our ribs ached. A successful transfer. A real, viable pregnancy. We thought we were free of them. We thought we had crossed the finish line. But yesterday at 4:15 p.m., a process server walked into the lobby of my office building. I was standing by the reception desk, looking over a shipping manifest, when a man in a gray windbreaker asked for Nathan. He handed me a thick manila envelope, gave a tight nod, and walked out. I opened it, right there. Iris's father owns a mid-sized logistics company. According to the documents in my hand, That company is currently being investigated for massive multi-year tax fraud. The Ayers had frozen all of his business and personal assets. His lawyer had drafted a petition, a desperate, legally dubious petition, demanding that Iris and I liquidate our house to fund his $150,000 legal defense retainer. The justification buried in the legalese was staggering. It claimed that because we had saved so much money abandoning our family obligation, and because Iris's father had gifted us $10,000 for our wedding 5 years ago, we were legally indebted to him and holding asset that rightfully belonged to his estate. It was frivolous. It was an intimidation tactic. I knew that intellectually, but my hands still shook. I shredded the document in the industrial shredder behind the receptionist's desk, watching the blades tear their demands into useless strips of paper. I drove home in silence. The Chicago sky was overcast, a flat, bruised purple. I didn't want to tell Iris. She was 14 weeks pregnant. Her blood pressure had been slightly elevated at her last appointment, and her OB had explicitly told us to minimize stress. But I couldn't hide a legal threat. When I walked through the front door, the house smelled like roasted chicken. Iris was standing at the kitchen island, chopping carrots. She was wearing my old college sweatshirt, humming softly to herself. She looked up, and whatever she saw on my face made her stop humming. She put the knife down. "What happened?" she asked. I set my briefcase on the floor. I walked over and held her by the shoulders. I told her exactly what had happened. I didn't sugarcoat it. I told her about the logistics company, the tax fraud, the frozen assets, and the petition. Iris didn't cry. She just stared at the cutting board. "He's drowning," she said quietly, "and he's trying to pull us under with him. He can't touch us," I said, though my voice lacked the absolute certainty I wanted it to have. "It's a scare tactic. The wedding gift was a gift. There's no contract. We don't owe him anything." "You don't know him, Nathan," she said, looking up at me. Her eyes were dark, perfectly clear. "When he's cornered, he burns everything down." The next morning, I called a lawyer a colleague had recommended. His name was Soren Fairfax. I sat in my parked car outside a coffee shop, watching the rain hit the windshield, and explained the entire situation over the phone. I explained the estrangement, the twisted obsession with Stella, the Gibson's dinner, and the shredded petition. Soren listened without interrupting. The only sound on his end was the faint tapping of a keyboard. When I finished, he cleared his throat. "The petition itself is garbage," Soren said. His voice was gravelly, pragmatic. "No judge is going to force you to liquidate your primary residence to pay your estranged father-in-law's criminal defense attorney because he bought you flowers and a DJ 5 years ago. It's a bullying tactic meant to force a settlement out of court. He wants you to panic and write him a check to make him go away." I leaned my head back against the headrest. "So we ignore it?" "No," Soren said quickly. "You never ignore court paper, even if it's garbage. But there's a bigger issue here, Nathan. If the Ears is looking at his logistics company for multi-year tax fraud, and his assets are frozen, they are going to do a forensic audit of every single dollar that moved in and out of his accounts over the last decade. They will look at his family members. They will look at you." My stomach tightened. "We've never been involved in his business. We don't take money from them." "Are you sure?" Soren asked. "Think carefully. Any loans? Any co-signed vehicles? Any shared accounts from when Iris was in college?" "No, nothing good. I'll draft a formal response to his lawyer today. I'll make it clear that any further harassment will result in a restraining order. But Nathan, keep your guard up. Men looking at federal prison don't fight fair." I thanked him and hung up. I thought that would be the end of it for the week. A formal letter from our lawyer shutting down their lawyer. A line drawn in the sand. But at 2 p.m., my phone buzzed on my desk. It was Stella. I picked it up immediately. "Hey, you okay?" "Nathan," she said. She was out of breath, like she had been running. Traffic noises blared in the background. "They found me." I sat up straight, my chair squeaking against the plastic floor mat. "Who? Where are you?" "My parents," Stella said, her voice shaking. "I'm standing outside my clinic. I just came out for my lunch break." My mother was sitting on the bench by the entrance. She grabbed my arm. "Did she hurt you? Do I need to call the police?" No, she didn't hurt me. She just, Nathan, she looked terrible. She looked like she hadn't slept in a month. She held onto my coat and started sobbing right there on the sidewalk. She said Dad is going to lose everything. She said the government is locking their accounts. "Stella, listen to me. Walk away from her. Go back inside." I did. "I'm inside the lobby now." "But Nathan, she wasn't asking for my money." Stella paused, taking a ragged breath. She said Dad's lawyer found a discrepancy in the property record. She said when you and Iris bought your house, Dad signed some kind of guarantor form through the business to help push your mortgage approval through faster. She said the Ayers considers your house a company asset. The blood drained from my face. The office around me felt suddenly freezing. "That's a lie," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "We put down 20%. We secured our own financing. We never asked him to guarantee anything." "I know," Stella cried. I told her she was lying, but she had a paper, Nathan. She showed it to me. It had your signature on it, and Iris's. I closed my eyes. 4 years ago, the closing process on the house. The endless stack of papers in the title office. Iris's father had been there. He had insisted on coming, saying he wanted to buy us a celebration dinner afterward. He had been standing over our shoulders, chatting with the title agent, pointing at lines to sign. We had been exhausted, signing document after document, trusting the process, trusting him. "I have to call Soren," I said, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Stella, do not speak to her again. Have security walk you to your car tonight." "Okay," she whispered. "Tell Iris I love her." I ended the call. I opened my laptop and immediately pulled up our digital mortgage archive. I started frantically clicking through the PDFs, scanning for anything with his name, anything related to his logistics company. There it was, buried 70 pages deep in the addendum. A corporate collateral agreement. It claimed a secondary lien position, using our property as collateral against a commercial credit line for his business. It bore 2 signatures that looked exactly like ours. He hadn't just tormented us. He hadn't just tried to degrade my marriage. He had tied our sanctuary to his sinking ship. I printed the document, the printer on the edge of my desk whirred to life, spitting out the 70 pages of the mortgage addendum one by one. The sound felt deafening in the quiet house. I gathered the warm sheets of paper, flipped to the signature page, and laid it flat on the desk. It was a damn good forgery. If I hadn't known with absolute certainty that I'd never seen this piece of paper in my life, I might have believed I signed it. The loop of my N was exactly right. Iris's signature was even better, capturing the slight slant she always used when she signed official documents. But it was the stamp at the bottom that made my stomach drop. The notary public seal belonged to a woman named Paige Thorne. I didn't know the name. I picked up my phone and called Soren back. He answered on the second ring. "I found it," I said. My voice was completely hollow. "He didn't just guarantee the loan. He forged a secondary collateral agreement. He put our house up against his commercial credit line." Soren was quiet for 3 seconds. "Send it to me, right now." I scanned the signature page and emailed it over. I heard Soren clicking on his end. "Look at the notary," I told him. "Paige Thorne. Do you know who that is?" "Give me a minute," Soren said. I heard him typing rapidly. A minute passed. Then 2. "Okay, I just pulled the corporate registry for your father-in-law's logistics company. Paige Thorne is listed as his director of human resources. He used an in-house employee to notarize a forged document tying your residential property to his business debt. Can we just show the ears it's forged? I asked. Can we just tell the bank? It's not that simple, Nathan, Soren sighed. The bank holds a recorded lien on your property. As far as they are concerned, that signature is yours until a judge says otherwise, and the ears seize an asset linked to a business they are currently seizing. You are now officially tangled in a federal tax fraud investigation. If that commercial line of credit goes into default, which it will, because his assets are frozen, the bank can initiate foreclosure on your house to recoup their money. I closed my eyes. The bruised purple sky outside the window had turned completely black. What do we do? I asked. We fight it, Soren said. We hire a forensic handwriting expert. We depose Paige Thorne. We file an injunction against the bank to halt any foreclosure proceeding. But Nathan, I have to be completely honest with you. This is going to be expensive, and it is going to take months. You need to pull together every dollar of liquid cash you have right now. Transfer it to a new account at a completely different bank. First thing tomorrow morning. Why? Because if the commercial lender realizes he's under federal investigation, they will trigger a cross-default clause. They will freeze every account tied to his name, and because your house is collateral, their automated system might sweep your linked accounts too. Move your money. Tonight, I hung up. I sat in the dark for a long time. I could hear Iris moving around downstairs, oblivious to the fact that the roof over our heads had just been stolen by the man who walked her down the aisle. I walked down the stairs. Iris was sitting on the couch, folding a pile of baby clothes she had bought earlier that week. Small, soft cotton onesies in pale yellows and greens. She looked up and smiled, but it faded the second she saw my face. I sat down on the coffee table facing her. I handed her the printed signature page. Stella called me, I said quietly. Her mother cornered her outside her work. They told her your dad had a document proving we owed them. I looked through our closing papers. Iris took the paper. She stared at it. She traced the ink of her own forged name with her index finger. I expected her to cry. I expected panic. Instead, her face went entirely blank. A terrifying, absolute stillness settled over her. He used Paige, she whispered. Paige has worked for him since I was 10 years old. She used to give me candy when I visited the office. Soren says we need to move our money, I said. Tonight, to a new bank. He thinks the commercial lender might freeze our accounts if they trigger a default. Iris didn't argue. She just set the paper down on the coffee table, right on top of a folded yellow onesie. She opened her laptop and we spent the next hour frantically wiring our savings and checking balances to a brand new account I opened online with a different national bank. We moved everything except a few $100s to keep the old accounts open. It felt like we were laundering our own money just to survive. The next morning, the reality of Soren's warning hit us like a freight train. I was at the grocery store. Iris had a craving for fresh peaches, and I wanted to get her out of the house to do something completely normal. We filled the cart with fruit, milk, some chicken, and a couple of magazines. The total was $140. I swiped my debit card. The terminal beeped. Declined. I frowned. I had used the card tied to the old account, knowing there was still $600 in it. I swiped it again. Declined. The cashier, a teenager looking thoroughly bored, sighed. Want to try another card? I pulled out my credit card, issued by the same bank. I inserted the chip. Declined. A hot flush of embarrassment crawled up my neck. The line behind us was growing. People were shifting their weight, staring at the back of my head. Iris put a hand on my arm. Her fingers were ice cold. I pulled out a third card, a completely separate credit card from the new bank we had transferred our money to the night before. It went through immediately. I grabbed the bags, my hands shaking slightly, and we walked out to the car in silence. Before I even started the engine, I pulled out my phone and opened my old bank's app. A red banner flashed across the top of the screen. Account restricted. Please contact your branch. I clicked on the checking account. The balance, which should have been $600, read $150,000. They hadn't just frozen it. They had levied the exact amount of her father's legal retainer demand against our personal account. The commercial bank had cross-referenced the names on the collateral agreement and issued a freeze on everything bearing my social security number within their institution. Iris, I said, my voice thick. I showed her the screen. She stared at the negative $150,000. She leaned her head against the passenger side window and closed her eyes. He's not just drowning, she said, her voice completely hollow. He's making sure we suffocate before he does. My phone vibrated in my hand. An incoming call. No caller ID, just a local Chicago area code. I answered it. Nathan, the voice came through the speaker. It was Iris's father. It wasn't the aggressive, drunken tone from the lake house. It wasn't the arrogant scoff from Gibson. It was smooth, calm, the voice of a businessman closing a deal. What did you do? I demanded, my grip on the steering wheel turning my knuckles white. I'm just utilizing the assets available to the company, Nathan, he said smoothly. You and Iris have a beautiful home, a lot of equity. It would be a shame if the bank forced a sale because we couldn't come to a family understanding. The Ayers is being very unreasonable with me. But if you were to voluntarily liquidate and provide the defense funds, I could sign a release on the lien. We could clear this all up. Family helping family. You forged our signatures, I snarled. You committed federal fraud. He chuckled. A low, wet sound. Prove it. You signed 100 pages that day, Nathan. Who's a judge going to believe? A desperate son-in-law trying to back out of a family obligation? Or my director of HR who swore under oath that she watched you sign it? He hung up. The line went dead. I sat in the parking lot, the smell of fresh peaches filling the car, and realized with sickening clarity that we weren't just fighting a legal battle. We were dealing with a man who had already decided we were acceptable casualty. When we got back to the house, there was a man in a navy polo shirt standing on our front porch. He held a clipboard. He looked up at the house, jotting something down, then walked over to the side yard, inspecting the foundation. I put the car in park and stepped out. Can I help you? The man looked up. Are you Nathan? Yes. He handed me a business card. It bore the logo of a commercial real estate appraisal firm. I'm here on behalf of Vanguard Commercial Lending, the man said casually, as if he were delivering the mail. They've initiated a preliminary valuation of the property pending a notice of default. I just need to take a few photos of the exterior. You can't do that, I said. My voice was tight. I stepped between him and the house. He stopped writing on his clipboard and looked at me. He wasn't intimidated. He just looked tired. Sir, I have a work order. If you obstruct me, I just note it in the file, and the bank moves to the next step of the default process. It usually involves a sheriff's deputy. I'm just taking pictures of the siding and the roof line. I looked at his camera. I looked at the house we had painted, the porch we had fixed up. Take them, I said, stepping aside. Take your pictures and get off my property. I stood on the wet lawn and watched him. He walked the perimeter, snapping photos of the gutters, the windows, the foundation. Every click of the shutter felt like a nail being driven into the wall. Our neighbor, an older guy named Whitmore, was out walking his golden retriever. He stopped at the end of the driveway, watching the man in the navy polo. I gave Whitmore a tight, forced wave and went inside. Iris was sitting at the kitchen island. She had a glass of water in front of her. She hadn't taken off her coat yet. Who was that? She asked. An appraiser, I said. I sat down across from her. I couldn't lie to her. Not about this. The commercial lender sent him. They're starting a preliminary valuation. Iris picked up her water glass. Her hand was shaking so badly the ice clinked violently against the rim. She took a sip and set it down. Then she put both hands on her stomach and leaned forward, closing her eyes. Iris, I'm cramping, she whispered. Panic spiked in my chest, sharp and cold. How bad? Just a dull ache. But it's there. My heart is beating too fast, Nathan. I stood up instantly. Come on, couch now. I helped her to the living room. I got her a blanket and propped her feet up on a pillow. I called her OBS triage line while she lay there, staring blankly at the ceiling. The nurse on the phone told me to monitor her, keep her hydrated, and bring her into the ER immediately if there was any bleeding. She emphasized the need for absolute bed rest and zero stress. Zero stress. I looked at the printed mortgage addendum, still sitting on the coffee table. I grabbed it, folded it aggressively, and shoved it into a drawer. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was Soren Fairfax. I need you in my office, Soren said. No pleasantries. Can you get here by 4? Iris is having cramps, I said, keeping my voice low so she wouldn't hear from the other room. I can't leave her. Is she bleeding? No. Okay, keep her lying down. Get a neighbor or Stella to come over if you have to. But you need to be here, Nathan. I pulled the corporate filings for Vanguard Commercial Lending. I know who the loan officer is who approved your father-in-law's credit line. We have a very narrow window before this goes from a civil dispute into a federal asset seizure. I hung up and called Stella. She answered sounding exhausted. I explained the situation with Iris. I'm leaving work right now, Stella said, her voice instantly dropping its fatigue. Theo is coming with me. We'll be there in 40 minutes. When they arrived, Stella looked like a ghost. She had dark circles under her eyes, and she was biting her nails down to the quick. Theo carried a brown paper bag of groceries and a heating pad. He gave me a firm nod, squeezed my shoulder, and went straight to the kitchen. Stella went to the couch and sat on the floor next to Iris, taking her sister's hand. I grabbed my keys and drove into the city. Soren's office was in a brutalist concrete building on Wacker Drive. The carpet in the waiting room was a faded maroon, smelling faintly of stale coffee and old paper. Soren was in his late 50s, with gray thinning hair and his sleeves rolled up to his elbows. His desk was buried under stacks of manila folders. He didn't offer me a seat. He just pointed to a document sitting squarely in the center of his blotter. Here's the reality of your situation, Soren said, leaning against his windowsill, the Chicago skyline gray and imposing behind him. Your father-in-law took out a $2 million line of credit from Vanguard 18 months ago. He maxed it out. When the ears froze his accounts, Vanguard realized they were holding an empty bag. They started pulling on every thread of collateral tied to the loan. Your house is the easiest target because it's a hard asset with equity. But the signature is Ford, I said. We have to go after the notary. Page Thorne. Soren picked up a pen and tapped it rhythmically against the desk. I sent an investigator to Page Thorne's apartment this morning. She's gone. I stared at him. Gone? Like, moved? Gone. Like her lease was broken 3 days ago. The apartment is empty, and her cell phone is disconnected. Your father-in-law didn't just use her to stamp a fake document. He knew the ears was closing in, and he paid her to disappear, so she couldn't be deposed. I felt physically sick. The room seemed to tilt slightly. So we have no proof. We have a forensic handwriting expert lined up, Soren corrected. But Vanguard's lawyers will argue that you signed it willingly to help family, and are now experiencing buyer's remorse. Handwriting analysis is subjective in a civil court. It's not a silver bullet. Then what is? Soren looked at me. His eyes were flat and serious. Leverage. Your father-in-law is playing a shell game with Vanguard and the ears. He's offering up your house to Vanguard to keep them satisfied, while he tries to hide whatever offshore accounts the ears is actually looking for. If we want Vanguard to drop the lien on your house, we have to give them something better. We have to show them where the real money is. I don't know anything about his business, I said. I sell medical devices. I don't know where he hides his cash. But someone does, Soren said. His wife. I thought of Iris's mother, the woman who had cornered Stella outside her clinic. The woman who had calmly suggested her daughter sleep with me in a hotel room to save clinic fees. She's a fanatic, I said. She's completely loyal to him. She'd never tell us anything. She's loyal because she thinks he's going to fix it, Soren said. She thinks throwing you and Iris to the wolves will save their lifestyle. You need to shatter that illusion. You need to show her that he's already thrown her under the bus. Soren pulled a thin blue folder from the stack and slid it across the desk toward me. I dug into the corporate structure of the logistics company. Your father-in-law isn't the sole owner. 5 years ago, he transferred 40% of the shares into a holding company. The primary officer of that holding company is his wife. I opened the folder. The legal jargon was dense, but the names were clear. When the ears indicts him, Soren continued, his voice devoid of sympathy, they aren't just going to seize the assets. They are going to press criminal charges for tax evasion and conspiracy. As a 40% shareholder and an active officer in the holding company that received the laundered funds, she is legally liable. She is going to federal prison with him. The words hung in the air. Federal prison. Does she know that? I asked. Wives in these situations rarely do, Soren said. They sign the papers their husbands put in front of them and enjoy the country club. You need to sit down with your mother-in-law. You need to show her this document. And you need to tell her that unless she gives us the location of the offshore account so Vanguard can seize them instead of your house, she is going down for conspiracy. I drove back to the suburb. The traffic on I-90 was a crawling, red-lit nightmare. My phone sat in the passenger seat. I didn't want to call Iris's mother. I wanted to cut these people out of my life, like a tumor. But the image of the appraiser walking around my house, the memory of the declined credit card, forced my hand. I pulled into my driveway. Theo's car was still there. I walked inside. The house smelled like chamomile tea. Stella was in the kitchen washing a mug. How is she? I asked. Sleeping, Stella said softly. The cramping stopped, but she's exhausted. Her blood pressure was still high when I checked it. Thank you for being here, Stella. Stella dried her hands on a towel. She looked at me, her expression hardening. My mother called me again while you were gone. She left a voicemail. Don't listen to it. I already did. She said Dad is willing to drop the whole thing if Iris and I just come to the house and talk to him. Without you. She said this is a family matter, and you're making it worse. I let out a harsh, bitter laugh. He doesn't have the power to drop it. The bank has the lien. He's just trying to isolate you. I pulled out my phone. I scrolled down to my blocked contacts. I unblocked her mother's number. What are you doing? Stella asked. I'm scheduling a meeting, I said. I dialed the number. It rang 3 times before she picked up. Nathan, she said. Her voice was cold, condescending. Meet me at the Starbucks on Route 59, I said. Tomorrow morning at 9. I have no interest in speaking with you. I want to see my daughter. You're going to want to see me, I said, my voice dead calm. Because I just left my lawyer's office, and I have the corporate filings for the holding company you own. The one the heirs is currently building a federal indictment around. Silence on the line. Absolute, suffocating silence. 9 o'clock, I said, and I hung up. The next morning, it was raining. A cold, miserable Chicago drizzle. I got to the Starbucks at 8:45. I bought a black coffee and sat at a small table in the back corner. The cafe was full of people working on laptops, completely oblivious to the fact that my life was being dismantled piece by piece. At 9:10, she walked in. She looked awful. Her blonde hair, usually perfectly blown out, was pulled back in a tight, messy clip. The expensive trench coat she wore looked wrinkled. The arrogance that usually radiated from her was gone, replaced by a brittle, twitchy energy. She saw me and walked over. She didn't buy a drink. She just sat down in the chair opposite me and crossed her arms. "This is harassment, Nathan," she snapped, though her voice lacked its usual bite. "My husband's attorney will hear about this." I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I just opened my briefcase, pulled out the thin blue folder Soren had given me, and slid it across the table. "Open it," I said. She stared at the folder like it was a live wire. "I don't look at legal documents without my counsel." "Your husband's counsel," I corrected. "Not yours. There's a difference. Open it." She slowly reached out and flipped the cover open. She looked at the first page. It was the registration for the holding company. Her name was listed as the primary officer and 40% shareholder. "I know about this," she said dismissively. "It's just an administrative entity for tax purposes. It's completely standard." "It was," I said, "until he used it to hide $3 million from the federal government. The ears isn't just auditing him anymore. They're preparing an indictment for tax evasion, wire fraud, and conspiracy. And because your name is right there on the holding company that received the funds, they are indicting you too." Her eyes darted up to mine. "That's a lie. He assured me I was insulated." "He lied to you," I said flatly. "Just like he lied to Vanguard Commercial Lending when he forged my signature to use my house as collateral for his business debt." She flinched. She actually flinched. "He paid Paige Thorne to break her lease and disappear so she couldn't testify," I continued, keeping the pressure on. "He's drowning, and he's using everyone around him as sandbags. He used my house to stall the bank, and he's using you to stall the heirs. You don't know what you're talking about," she whispered. Her hands were shaking. She clasped them together on the table to stop them. "I know Vanguard is moving to foreclose on my home, my pregnant wife's home, and I know that the only way to stop them is to give them the actual assets your husband is hiding. The offshore accounts, the real money." I leaned forward. I didn't care about the people sitting at the tables next to us. "You're going to tell me where the money is," I said. "I don't know," she said, her voice cracking. "I swear to God, Nathan, I don't know. He handles all the finances. Then you better start digging, because if you don't give me something I can take to Vanguard's lawyers by Friday, I'm taking this file straight to the IRS investigator handling your husband's case. I will sit in their office, and I will explain exactly how the holding company was structured. I will make sure they know you are an active participant, not a naive spout." Tears welled up in her eyes. Real tears this time. Not the manipulative performance from Gibson. It was the raw terror of a woman realizing the floor was gone. "He's my husband," she choked out. "You're asking me to betray my husband. He asked me to sleep with your daughter to save a few grand," I said, my voice like ice. "He forged my name to steal my house. Don't talk to me about betrayal." I stood up. I left the blue folder on the table. "You have until Friday," I said. I walked out of the coffee shop and into the rain. I felt a grim, dark satisfaction in my chest, but it was overshadowed by the reality of what I had just done. I had essentially blackmailed my mother-in-law. I was playing in the dirt with them now. When I got back to the house, Theo was gone. Stella was sitting on the porch swing, wrapped in a blanket, staring out at the rain. I walked up the steps and sat down next to her. The swing creaked under our weight. "Iris is still asleep," Stella said quietly. "She's doing better. Her color is back." "Good." We sat in silence for a few minutes. The rain hit the roof in a steady, drumming rhythm. "I talked to my mom," I said finally. Stella didn't look at me. "What did she say?" "I showed her documents proving she's legally liable for the tax fraud. I told her if she doesn't find the hidden money to pay off the bank, she's going to prison with it." Stella let out a long, shuddering breath. She closed her eyes. "God, it never ends, does it? It's just a black hole. It pulls everything in." "I'm sorry," I said, and I meant it. "I'm sorry I have to do this to your family." Stella opened her eyes and looked at me. "They aren't my family anymore, Nathan. Not really. Family doesn't do this." She pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders. "But you need to know something. If she actually turns on him, if she actually tries to find that money, he will destroy her. You don't know what he's capable of when he loses control. When I was a teenager, a contractor tried to sue him for unpaid invoices. My dad didn't just fight the lawsuit. He hired a private investigator, found out the contractor was having an affair, anonymously sent the proof to the guy's wife, and waited until the divorce ruined the guy's business before settling the invoice for penny. He doesn't just win, he annihilates." A chill ran down my spine that had nothing to do with the damp air. "I'll handle him," I said. "You can't," Stella said, her voice tight with fear. "That's what I'm trying to tell you. You pushed her into a corner today. But if she pushes him, he's going to know it came from us. He's going to come for you, Nathan, directly." Thursday morning, the mail arrived at 11. I walked out to the mailbox, my boots crunching on the wet gravel at the end of the driveway. I pulled out a stack of envelopes. Most of it was junk, but in the middle of the pile was a thick, cream-colored envelope. No return address, just my name and Iris's name, printed in a blocky mechanical font. I opened it right there by the mailbox. Inside was a single sheet of paper. It was a photocopy of a medical record. I stared at it, my brain struggling to process what I was looking at. It was a clinic intake form. The logo at the top belonged to the IF clinic Iris and I had used. The dates matched our first failed cycle. There was a yellow sticky note attached to the center of the page. The handwriting was unmistakable. It was her father's aggressive, slanted scrawl. "You really think I don't know what goes on in my own family? Stop harassing my wife. Drop the lawyer, or this goes to Vanguard to show them exactly why you need money so badly. Your move." I read the clinic form again. It wasn't Iris's intake form. It was Stella's. It detailed a preliminary consultation for egg donation. The date was exactly 1 week after the disastrous lake house trip, where he had first suggested she sleep with me. While her parents had been trying to groom her into a natural surrogate, Stella had quietly, secretly gone to our clinic to see if she could donate her eggs to us to circumvent the genetics argument entirely. She had never told us. She had been rejected as a donor due to a minor underlying genetic marker she carried that Iris didn't. He had found it. He had somehow accessed Stella's private medical records. He was holding her deepest vulnerability, her secret attempt to save us from his madness, as leverage. I crushed the paper in my fist. The rage that hit me was blinding. It wasn't the slow, creeping panic of the bank or the cold calculation of the lawyer. It was pure, white, hot fury. I didn't walk back into the house right away. I stood at the end of the driveway in the freezing rain, letting the water soak through the shoulders of my jacket. My hands were shaking, but not from fear anymore. It was a deep, physical reaction to a man who simply would not stop violating the people I loved. He was weaponizing Stella's body all over again. He had taken her quietest, most desperate attempt to fix her sister's pain, a secret she hadn't even trusted us with, and turned it into a cheap bargaining chip to save his own skin. I folded the damp paper, shoved it into the inner pocket of my jacket, and zipped it up. I took 3 deep breaths, letting the cold air burn my lungs until my heart stopped hammering against my ribs. When I walked up the porch steps, Stella was still sitting on the swing. She looked up at me, her eyes tracing the rigid line of my jaw. Did something else come? She asked. Just junk, I lied. The words tasted like ash. Car insurance renewal. A credit card offer. I walked past her and into the house. I couldn't look at her. If I looked at her, I would break down and tell her what her father had done, and I knew with absolute certainty that it would destroy whatever fragile piece of her spirit she had left. I went straight to the garage, locking the heavy fire door behind me. The air out here smelled like motor oil and damp concrete. I pulled the crumpled clinic form out of my pocket, smoothed it flat against the hood of my car, and took a high-resolution photo of it. Then, I called Soren. He picked up on the first ring. Did she talk? Not yet, I said. But he just made a move. I explained the envelope, the lack of a return address, the photocopy of the IF intake form, and the yellow sticky note in her father's handwriting. Soren was dead silent for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was dangerously sharp. Send it to me. I emailed the photo right there from the garage. A minute passed. I heard Soren's computer chime in the background. Nathan, Soren said slowly, this is a Schedule A medical document. It contains detailed genetic screening markers, a full reproductive history, and an explicit statement of intent. The clinic is legally bound by HIPAA to guard this with their lives. How did he get it? I asked. Did he hack them? He doesn't need to hack them, Soren scoffed. He owns a logistics company that handles sensitive freight. He likely knows people who know people. Or, he hired a private investigator who social engineered a receptionist at the clinic. It happens more often than you'd think. They pose as an insurance auditor, flash a fake credential, and walk out with a PDF. But Nathan, this changes the board entirely. How? Because blackmailing you with a forged mortgage addendum is a civil matter until we can definitively prove the forgery. But possessing and transmitting illegally obtained, federally protected medical records across state lines to extort a financial outcome, that is a felony. It's a clear-cut violation of the HIPAA criminal provision. Men go to federal prison for a very long time for that. So we go to the police. No, Soren said quickly. We go to Vanguard's legal counsel first thing tomorrow, because Vanguard doesn't know they are in bed with a man who is actively committing federal extortion to secure the asset he pledged to them. If Vanguard's compliance department sees this, they will drop him like a radioactive rock. They will invalidate the lien themselves, just to distance the bank from a federal criminal investigation. Relief, sharp and sudden, washed over me. Are you sure? Banks are risk-averse, Soren said. They want your house, yeah, but they don't want a subpoena from the Department of Justice regarding their loan origination practices. This document is a liability to them. What about Stella? I asked, looking at the piece of paper on the hood of my car. If we give this to the bank, if this becomes a legal exhibit, she's going to find out. She's going to know he dug through her medical history. I can redact the medical specifics, Soren said gently. But the header, the dates, the intent, yes, she's going to have to know. You can't use this as leverage without her eventual consent to be named as the victim of the HIPAA breach. I rubbed my hand over my face. I need a day. Let me handle Iris's mother first. If her mother cracks by Friday, we don't have to use this. We don't have to drag Stella through the mud again. You have until Monday, Soren said, because Vanguard isn't waiting. Their lawyers filed a motion this morning for an expedited preliminary hearing. They want a judge to authorize the foreclosure process in 60 days. I hung up the phone. 60 days. 2 months before a sheriff's deputy would show up at my front door with an eviction notice. I stayed in the garage for another 10 minutes, tearing the physical copy of the clinic form into tiny, unrecognizable shreds and throwing them into the oily trash can by the workbench. When I went back inside, the house was quiet. Theo had returned from a pharmacy run and was sitting at the kitchen island, quietly paying bills on his laptop. He looked up and gave me a tired nod. She's up, Theo whispered, pointing toward the stairs. Stella is with her. I walked upstairs. The door to our bedroom was cracked open. I pushed it gently. Iris was propped up against a mountain of pillows, looking terrifyingly pale but awake. Stella was sitting on the edge of the bed, holding a glass of water with a plastic straw. Hey, Iris said. Her voice was weak. I walked over, kissed her forehead, and sat on the edge of the mattress next to Stella. How's the cramping? Gone, Iris breathed. The OBS nurse called back. They think it was stress-induced round ligament pain, combined with the blood pressure spike. I have to go in for an ultrasound tomorrow morning to check the heartbeat, but they think we're okay. I can't move around. You're not moving anywhere, I said firmly. You are staying right here. Iris looked at me, her eyes searching my face. She knew me too well. What happened while I was asleep, Nathan? You have that look. I glanced at Stella. She was watching me closely. I couldn't tell them about the letter. Not now. Not while Iris was confined to bed under strict orders to avoid stress, and not while Stella was sitting 2 feet away from me. I talked to your mother, I said carefully. It was the truth, just not the whole truth. Stella's head snapped toward me. Iris went completely still. I met her at a coffee shop this morning, I continued, keeping my tone even and measured. I showed her the corporate filings for the holding company. I explained that she is legally exposed to the federal tax fraud investigation because her name is on the account. Iris swallowed hard. What did she say? She panicked. She claimed she didn't know he was hiding money. I told her she has until Friday to find the offshore account numbers and give them to me. Or, I'm taking the file to the ears investigator myself. Stella let out a sharp, breathless laugh that sounded entirely devoid of humor. You threatened her with the ears? Nathan, are you insane? Do you have any idea the kind of retaliation he's going to authorize when she runs crying to him? She's not going to run to him, I said. Because if she does, she's admitting she talked to me. She's admitting she looked at the documents. She's trapped. Stella, you don't know them, Stella argued, standing up from the bed. She paced toward the window, her arms crossed tight over her chest. They don't turn on each other. They close ranks. You just poked a hornet's nest. I had to do something. I kept my voice low, mindful of Iris. Vanguard filed for an expedited hearing today. They want to start foreclosure in 60 days. We don't have the luxury of playing defense anymore. Iris closed her eyes. A single tear slipped down her cheek, soaking into the white cotton pillowcase. 60 days. It's not going to happen, I said, grabbing her hand. Her fingers were still ice cold. I have a plan with Soren. We have leverage. I spent the rest of Thursday in a state of hypervigilance. Every time a car drove past our house, I found myself walking to the window. Every time my phone vibrated, my chest tightened. Theo and Stella stayed the night. We ordered Thai food and ate it in the living room in a forced, unnatural quiet. Iris stayed in bed. I brought her a plate, but she only managed a few bites of noodles before pushing it away. At 2:14 a.m., my phone buzzed on the nightstand. I woke up instantly. The room was pitch black. I grabbed the phone. An incoming text message from an unknown number. 1104 West Kinsey Street, Unit 4B. Tomorrow at noon. Come alone. I stared at the screen. The glowing text burned my retinas. It was a downtown address, the Fulton Market District. It wasn't a coffee shop or a public place. I didn't reply. I just screenshot the message and sent it to Soren's private email with the subject line, meeting her tomorrow. The next morning, the rain had stopped, but the sky remained a bruised, heavy gray. I drove Iris to her OB appointment at 9. Stella insisted on coming with us, sitting in the back seat and talking a mile a minute about a new podcast she was listening to, desperately trying to fill the heavy silence in the car. The ultrasound room was dark and smelled like medical-grade sanitizer. I held Iris's hand as the technician ran the wand over her stomach. For a terrifying minute, the room was completely silent, except for the hum of the machine. And then, a fast, rhythmic thump, thump, thump filled the small space. Iris let out a sob, covering her mouth with her free hand. I leaned my forehead against her shoulder, closing my eyes. Heart rate is strong, the technician smiled, pointing at the blurry gray shape on the monitor. Baby looks perfectly healthy. But Mom, your blood pressure is still hovering right on the edge of the danger zone. You need to rest. I mean it. We drove back to the house. I got Iris settled on the couch with a book and a cup of decaf tea. I looked at the clock. It was 11 am. I have to run to the office for a few hours, I told her, kissing her cheek. I have a conference call with a hospital purchasing director. It was a lie, and I hated how easily it came out. Be careful driving, Iris murmured, not looking up from her book. The roads are still slick. I drove downtown. The address on Kinsey Street belonged to a converted warehouse. It was an old brick building with massive industrial windows and a sleek, modern call box by the heavy metal front door. I found Unit 4B on the digital directory. The name next to it was Wyndham, not a name I recognized. I pressed the buzzer. A few seconds later, the lock clicked, and the heavy door swung open slightly. I walked into the lobby. It was empty, smelling of expensive floor wax and old brick. I took the elevator to the 4th floor. The hallway was lined with dark wood doors. I walked down to the end of the hall. 4B. I didn't knock. I just stood there for a moment, listening, nothing. I raised my hand and knocked twice. The door opened immediately. Iris's mother stood there. She looked entirely different from the woman I had seen at Starbucks. She was wearing a pair of faded jeans and a plain black sweater. No jewelry, no makeup. She looked 10 years older, stripped of the armor of her wealth. She stepped back, motioning for me to come inside. I walked into the apartment. It was a stunning loft space, but it looked utterly unlived in. The furniture was modern and stark. There were no photos, no books, no personal items, just a pristine staging area. Whose place is this? I asked, keeping my distance. It belongs to one of his corporate shell companies, she said, her voice quiet. She locked the door behind me, throwing the deadbolt with a loud metallic clack. He uses it for out-of-town clients. He doesn't know I have a key. Do you have the account numbers? I asked. I didn't want to be here. I wanted to get the leverage and leave. She walked over to the kitchen island. There was a beige canvas tote bag sitting on the marble counter. She reached inside and pulled out a thick, leather-bound notebook. It wasn't a sleek corporate ledger. It looked like a personal journal. I don't have the offshore numbers, she said, her hands trembling slightly as she held the notebook. He keeps those locked on an encrypted drive in his office safe. I can't get to them. Anger flared in my chest. Then why did you bring me here? I told you, if you don't give me something I can take to the bank, I have something else, she interrupted, her voice rising in sudden, desperate panic. I have something Vanguard will want more than your house. She slid the leather notebook across the marble island. I walked over and looked down at it. I didn't touch it. What is this? It's a shadow ledger, she whispered. He's been keeping it for 7 years. It details every bribe, every kickback, every illegal campaign contribution he funneled through the logistics company to secure municipal contracts in the city. I stared at her. You're telling me your husband is bribing city officials? I'm telling you he bought the alderman in the 7th ward, she said, her eyes wide. Terrified. I'm telling you he paid off a zoning commissioner to get the warehouse expansion approved. It's all in there. Dates, amounts, names, handwritten. Why would Vanguard care about this? Because the zoning commissioner he paid off? She swallowed hard. He sits on the regional board for Vanguard Commercial Lending. He's the one who pushed my husband's $2 million credit line through the approval process, even when my husband's credit metrics were failing. Vanguard didn't just give him a bad loan, Nathan. They were complicit in a corrupt lending scheme. I finally reached out and opened the notebook. The pages were filled with his aggressive, slanted handwriting. Columns of dates, initials, and massive dollar amounts. Beside one entry from 18 months ago, clearly marked VCL loan approval, was a secondary line. Cash payout to C. Keating, $75,000. If you give this to Vanguard's general counsel, she said, her voice shaking violently now, they won't just drop the lien on your house. They will bury the entire credit line to prevent the SEC from finding out their board members are taking cash bribes for loan approval. She was right. Soren had said banks were risk-averse. This wasn't just a risk. This was a catastrophic institutional scandal. How long have you had this? I asked, looking up at her. I found it 3 days ago, she said, wrapping her arms around herself. He left his home office unlocked when the heirs server showed up at the house. He was panicking. I went in to get a checkbook, and I found this hidden behind a false back in his bottom drawer. I took it because I knew. Knew what? I knew he was going to let me take the fall, she choked out. The dam broke, and she started to cry. Ugly, racking sobs. I saw the emails with his defense attorney. He was laying the groundwork to claim I acted independently with the holding company. He's going to tell the federal prosecutors that I managed the laundered funds without his knowledge. I looked at the woman who had spent years treating my wife like an incubator, who had stood in my garage and told Stella to slip into my bed. I felt absolutely zero pity for her. So you're giving this to me to save yourself, I said coldly. I'm giving it to you because he's a monster, she said, wiping her face with the back of her hand. And because if you take this to Vanguard and they drop the lien, he'll know I betrayed him. He'll know I gave it to you. I don't care about your marriage, I said, closing the notebook. I care about my house and my wife. You need to care. She stepped toward me, grabbing my forearm. Her grip was surprisingly strong. Her fingernails dug into my jacket. Nathan, listen to me. If you use this, you have to promise me something. I'm not promising you anything. You have to get Stella out of the city, she pleaded, her eyes wild. Tonight, you have to send her somewhere he can't find her. I pulled my arm away. What are you talking about? The clinic, she whispered, her voice dropping to a terrifyingly quiet register. The IF clinic. He didn't just get her medical records. Nathan, my blood ran cold. The photo of the clinic intake form on my phone felt like a physical weight in my pocket. What do you mean? He has someone on the inside, she said, looking over her shoulder at the locked door, as if he were standing on the other side. A lab tech, someone who owed him money. He found out Stella went there a year ago, but he didn't just get her file. She turned back to me. Her face was completely drained of color. He paid the tech to pull the genetic screening vials they keep in cold storage. she said. The blood samples Stella gave them when she applied to be a donor. He has them, Nathan. He has her Dina. The words hung in the sterile, expensive air of the apartment. I felt a coldness spread through my chest, replacing the anger with something entirely different. Absolute, terrifying clarity. He wasn't just a desperate businessman trying to save his asset. He was deeply, profoundly sick. He viewed his daughters as raw material. He viewed us all as property, and he had bought a piece of Stella to prove it. I reached out and picked up the leather-bound notebook. It felt heavy in my hands. What is he going to do with it? I asked, my voice completely flat. I don't know, she cried, hugging her arms tightly across her chest. He said he was keeping it as an insurance policy, to prove he could always get to her. He said if you fought the lien, he'd use it to manufacture a genetic claim on your baby, to tie you up in family court for a decade. You have to get her out of the city, Nathan. No, I said. Stella isn't going anywhere. I put the notebook into my briefcase and snapped the brass clasps shut. Nathan, please, she begged, stepping in front of the door. You have to promise me you won't tell him I gave this to you. I'm not going to tell him anything, I said. Move. She stepped aside, her breath hitching in her throat. I unlocked the deadbolt, walked out into the quiet hallway, and didn't look back. I didn't go back to the suburb. I drove straight to Wacker Drive. I parked in a loading zone, didn't care about the ticket, and walked into Soren's office building. His receptionist tried to tell me he was on a conference call, but I walked right past her and pushed his heavy office door open. Soren looked up, annoyed, holding a phone to his ear. I dropped the leather notebook onto the center of his desk. Soren told the person on the phone he would call them back, and hung up. He looked at me, then down at the book. What is this? It's his shadow ledger, I said, my voice shaking with the adrenaline I was finally letting myself feel. It details every bribe he paid to secure city contract. And there's an entry from 18 months ago, a $75,000 cash payout to a man named C. Keating for Vanguard's loan approval. Soren went entirely still. He didn't speak. He reached out, opened the book, and flipped to the date I mentioned. He stared at the handwritten entry for a long, silent minute. When he finally looked up, his eyes were wide. Charles Keating. He's the executive vice president of Vanguard's commercial lending division. He sits on their regional board. There's more, I said. He didn't just pull Stella's intake form from the clinic. He bribed a lab tech. He has physical vials of her blood from cold storage. He has her Dina. He's holding it as an insurance policy to threaten us with a manufactured custody suit. Soren slowly closed the notebook. The pragmatism that usually anchored his face was gone, replaced by a cold, predatory focus. This isn't a civil dispute anymore, Nathan, Soren said quietly. This is a federal slam dunk. We don't wait for Monday. We go right now. It was 3 p.m. when we walked into the Vanguard commercial lending headquarters. Soren had bypassed the legal department entirely and demanded a direct meeting with Charles Keating, threatening to go straight to the SEC compliance officer if he was denied. We were escorted into a massive mahogany boardroom on the 42nd floor. The view of Lake Michigan was breathtaking, but the room felt like a tomb. Keating walked in 5 minutes later. He was a tall man in a bespoke navy suit, looking irritated and arrogant. He didn't offer his hand. I have exactly 10 minutes, Mr. Fairfax, Keating said, sitting at the head of the table. I'm not sure what this is about. If it's regarding the logistics default, the collateral lien is ironclad. We will be proceeding with foreclosure. Soren didn't sit down. He just unlatched his briefcase, pulled out a single, high-resolution photocopy of the ledger page, and slid it face up across the polished wood table. Keating looked down at it. It took about 4 seconds for the arrogance to completely vanish. The color drained from his face so fast, I thought he might pass out. He stared at his own initials, his own payout, documented in unforgiving black ink. You have a forged collateral agreement holding my client's primary residence hostage, Soren said, his voice deadly calm. And you pushed the underlying credit line through because you took $75,000 in a duffel bag from a man who is currently under investigation by the ears. Keating opened his mouth, but no sound came out. Here are our terms, Soren continued. You will release the lien on Nathan and Iris's property. You will draft the release, execute it, and file it with the county clerk by 10 a.m. tomorrow. If I don't have the stamped confirmation by 10:01, this original ledger goes to the Securities and Exchange Commission, the FBI field office, and the Chicago Tribune. You won't just lose your job, Charles. You'll lose your pension, your reputation, and the next 20 years of your life. Keating looked up. He was sweating. I need to talk to our legal. You don't talk to anyone. Soren snapped, slamming his hand on the table. The sound echoed off the glass wall. You sign the release tomorrow morning, or you're done. We walked out. We left him sitting alone at the massive table, staring at the photocopy. At 9:45 the next morning, my phone vibrated. I was sitting at the kitchen island, drinking coffee, watching Iris sleep on the couch. It was an email from Soren. Attached was a PDF. It was a full, unconditional release of the collateral lien, stamped and filed by the Cook County Clerk's office. Vanguard had completely severed their claim to our house. The property was ours. The debt was void. I put my head down on the cool granite counter and let out a breath I felt like I had been holding for 6 years. But we weren't finished, because we had never signed a non-disclosure agreement with Vanguard. We had just leveraged Keating's terror to save our home. At noon, Soren walked into the federal prosecutor's office downtown. He handed the original leather notebook to the IR's lead investigator. He handed the photocopy of the IFE clinic form and a sworn affidavit regarding the stolen blood vials to the Department of Justice. The collapse happened with breathtaking speed. The federal government doesn't move slowly when you hand them a neatly organized map of municipal bribery and medical extortion. 2 weeks later, the FBI raided the logistics company. They raided his house in Lake Geneva. They raided the IFE clinic and arrested the lab tech before he could finish his shift. Iris's father was indicted on 42 counts of wire fraud, tax evasion, conspiracy, and federal HIPAA violation. His bail was denied because he was deemed a flight risk due to the offshore accounts the ledger eventually led them to. Her mother wasn't spared. She had tried to trade her husband for her freedom, but the federal government doesn't negotiate with 40% shareholders when they already have the paper trail. Her name was on the holding company. She was indicted right alongside him. The vials of Stella's blood were recovered from a private cold storage unit he had rented under a fake name. A federal judge ordered them destroyed. Stella wept for 3 hours when I finally told her everything, sitting on our porch swing while the police processed the clinic. But they were tears of profound relief. The ghost was finally dead. It's late November now. The air in Chicago is crisp and smells like wood smoke. I'm standing in the nursery. The walls are painted a soft sage green. I'm rocking our daughter, Nora. She was born 3 weeks ago, perfectly healthy, with a shock of dark hair. Stella is sitting in the armchair in the corner, holding a warm bottle, laughing quietly at a joke Theo just made from the hallway. Iris is asleep in the master bedroom down the hall, finally getting the rest she deserved. There are no process servers. There are no threatening phone calls. There are no letters with missing return addresses. There is just the quiet, steady sound of my daughter breathing against my chest, and the absolute certainty that the doors to this house are locked, and the people inside are finally safe.